Welcome to Universal Man. My name is Mark Kweppett, and I'm here to help you stop screwing around with low-value escapism and instead play a bigger game with your life so that you can win where it matters and become a man that you admire. Today I'm back with another episode of the Man of Action series, and today what we're going to be doing is taking a deep dive into the art of self-motivation. I'm going to be teaching you the secrets of how to ignite emotional desire inside of you to do good things. You know, it's one thing to be able to set productive goals. It's another thing to kind of be able to force yourself to take some action and whatever, but it's another thing entirely if you actually want to do good things. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So if you've ever set some goals and you've struggled to follow through with them because, you just actually don't know why. You don't know what's breaking down inside of you. You don't know why you're so passionate one moment and then you're just flat as heck the next and you're just not doing it. Well, this is the video for you. I can almost guarantee that if you watch through this video, you will find out where things are breaking down for you and what you can do about it. Now, before we get into it, I just want to make sure I take the time to tell you that if you're serious about doing this work, if you're serious about real progress, then you need a community. And that's what I've built with the Vanguard. All right, the Vanguard, as far as I can tell, it's the best online masculine self-development community that exists. We've got a forum, we've got a Discord, we've got weekly calls where you can come on live, you can talk to me. We've got a Q&A if you can't make the calls, so you can submit it and I'll think about it and I'll put down my answer for you. And it's all, it's very reasonably priced. So check it out, join the Vanguard today and make the transformation. Okay, let's start this conversation talking about the state that most people are in when they are trying to be productive. And I would call this a state of labor. You're acting as a laborer, meaning you feel like in order for you to do good things, it feels like you're walking uphill, like with the wind in your face, and it just sucks, okay? And you got to know how to do this to some extent. You have to know how to do hard things that you don't want to do. This is very important, and there's no way around this, okay? So I'm not promising you some magic pill, okay? Because the reality is sometimes things are going to be hard, and you don't want to do them. But what if you could take your labor, and as you're struggling and you're doing this hard stuff, you're walking up this hill, what if I could give you a backpack? And this backpack, it makes your labor a little bit harder because it takes some work because it's got a little weight to it. But as you're walking, it charges up an internal battery in the backpack. And after that battery reaches a certain level of fullness, that backpack, it actually becomes a jetpack and you can actually fly up the hill. That's what I want to be teaching you how to do. This jetpack, this is what motivation is. In order to be able to self-motivate, it takes some work. This is you charging up the backpack. But if you do that work and you know how to do that work properly, then eventually that energy will get released. And it'll actually release more energy than you put into it. And you can fly along towards your goals with, sometimes you can get so motivated that you actually have to restrain yourself. You actually have to slow yourself down because you're too passionate, you're too on fire for what you're doing. And so, this is what I want to show you how to do. And everyone's experienced this. Sometimes we pick these things up unconsciously. So, for example, if you saw my first Man of Action series where I was talking about the dopamine detox, all right, that was one of my most popular videos I've ever done. And people were really motivated. Well, what I just did there is I handed you a backpack. I created some motivation, and if you weren't motivated beforehand and then you're motivated afterward to do something good for yourself, well then, it worked. I handed you a backpack that turned into this jetpack of motivation. But I don't want you to be reliant on other people to hand you these things. It's kind of like the whole teach a man to fish versus, give a man a fish, right? So I want to teach you how to make your own motivation. I want to teach you the art and science behind this, because then no matter what the circumstances that you're dealing with, you're going to be able to tap into the motivation you need to get to where you want to go. So how do we do this? Well, first we got to understand what this jetpack of motivation is. Well, what it is, it's shifting from the mentality of the laborer to the mentality of play, okay? And when you are in a state of play, what I would say is that you are playing a game, okay? And so jetpack design or motivation design is really the art of constructing games. And if you've noticed, like the tagline for Universal Man, after a number of iterations through my other projects, it is now play a bigger game, because that's really the heart of all this. If you know how to construct a game and play it, then you tap into tremendous amounts of motivation and power. Now, we got to talk about, how do you do this? How do you make a game out of productive work? Most of us, we just view it as this hard slog that sucks, right? Well, we can change this. We can change this. It all depends on how you approach it and what you've got lined up. Okay. And so that's really what this video is about. It's like teaching you how you can go from unmotivated laborer to highly motivated player. Okay. So in order to do this, we got to use a concept that I've developed. I'm calling it 3D game design. I'm calling it 3D game design because there's 3 dimensions to it. All right. And then there's also another 3 dimensions that we'll get to later. So I don't know if that makes it 6D game design or 9D, 3, is it 3? I don't know, whatever. So the 3 dimensions that we're first going to concern ourselves with are the philosophical layer of the game, the strategic layer of the game, and the tactical layer of the game. Okay. So if you're going to construct a game for yourself, first you got to get the philosophical level right. And what this is about, it's about having a compelling goal and then a win condition. So you could say you could have an end result you're looking for, and then a way to keep score, like a scoreboard. All right, and like software development and businesses and stuff, they call this having an OKR, an objective and key results that you can measure whether or not you hit your objective by. So, like for example, if you're trying to lose weight, losing weight would be the goal, and then you pick a number of pounds that you want to lose. That could be the scoreboard, or a body fat percentage or something like that. Maybe the goal would be quitting porn. And the way in which you measure that, the way you keep score, would be number of days clean without porn or something like that. So, you know, the typical reboot would be 90 days. Next, you got to get the strategic layer figured out. Because, all right, you have a goal, you know how you measure it, but, you know, if you don't have a plan to get there, it's going to be very hard to get pumped to go toward that thing, because it's just a big blank in your mind. So we got to build a bridge between where you are and where you want to be, which is that win condition, right? That's the strategic layer. It builds this mental bridge, and without that, you're not going to be motivated. So we get that, and you'll be motivated. So for example, if you want to lose the weight, then maybe you have to come up with a plan. It could be something like, really some complex weight training and calorie counting sort of thing, or it could be something simple like I'm going to walk and eat vegetables or something like that. But you need to nail it down specifically what you're doing, and then you'll get there. For quitting porn, maybe it's like you decide that you're going to journal and use my Reforged Man course or something like that. All right. And we'll talk more about the details of designing the strategy, because there's some stuff that goes into that, but you need to have a strategy, okay? And then finally, you got the tactical layer. And this is the layer where kind of like the rubber meets the road, where it comes down to you actually acting, okay? And in the 2 examples we've been talking about so far, quitting porn and losing weight, a big part of that is like, can you overcome the urges to go against your plan? So for example, like with quitting porn, it's like, can you overcome a porn urge? You know, when it comes to losing weight, can you overcome that desire to eat 12 cupcakes? All right. And a lot of people miss the tactical layer, especially for internal stuff, because they just think you just got to like mentally push. And there's actually a lot more that goes into that. That's why I spend a lot of time talking about self-talk. I talk about like, you know, the cut method. I talk about all these different mindset things, because you need to like know the tactics. You need to know how to actually do it. And also in the tactical layer, you got stuff like environmental design. It's like, are you surrounding yourself with triggers or things that would derail you or get in your way? And do you have the right tools and stuff that you need to make your plan happen? All right. And so if you get all 3 of these layers lined up, then your brain basically has a clear path to the goal. It has a clear path to the thing that it wants, and it's just going to take off like an arrow, or like a person with a jetpack. And that's the whole plan here. That's the whole thing. So like, you know, if we're going to do an example here, say you wanted to have a really engaged employee working for you. Well, what would you want to do? Well, you'd want that to turn their job into a compelling game to them. And following this model, well, you'd have to get them bought into your company's big goal. Maybe if it's a charity thing or something like that, it's like, oh, we're going to, get this many meals for the homeless, okay? And because we care about making an impact for people who don't have that stuff, okay? And maybe that you got to get that employee bought into that goal. And then you got to get them bought into the strategy. You got to get them to see, all right, here's how what you do specifically plugs into feeding homeless people, which is something you care about. And so that person, they get a mental connection between, all right, here's where I'm at. Here's how I can get to the thing that I care about. And then finally, you got to train them in it. You got to make sure that they are tactically sound in their ability to actually accomplish their tasks. So, if it's some kind of sales thing, or if it's some kind of fundraising, or if it's like, it comes down to actually like making the food, well, do they know how to make the food? All this kind of stuff. So it's like you line up that stuff, they resonate with it, and then boom, okay? They're going to be motivated and it's going to be great. The big problem here is, I kind of alluded to it in that last little bit, is that if they resonate with it, they'll be good to go. Now, that's the problem. We often will have relatively clear goals. Sometimes we won't have clear goals, and obviously that's not going to work. If you don't have clarity, it's not going to work. But if you do have clarity and it's still not working, then it's usually an issue of resonance. You're not resonating with some part of the plan. And when I use the word resonant, you might be thinking I'm being kind of woo-woo and out there, but I'm not. I think that we can actually technically define this, and it's actually extremely important, okay? And so here's where we got to introduce the next 3 dimensions of this. And really, in order to have resonance, you need to have an agreement, an alignment between your head, your heart, and your circumstances. Or if we're going to put it in more complex terms, it's between your primal self, your terminal self, and the contextual reality that you're operating in. Or if we're going to put it in more simple language, it's you need to have basically your rational mind, your emotional mind, and the things in front of you all kind of working together. Okay. And if you can do this, if you can get that kind of alignment between all these different pieces, that's what creates resonance. And so often it's this stuff that's off. That's disconnected. And if you're disconnected at any of this level, well, then the motivation is going to shut down, and it's going to go back into feeling like a grind. It's going to feel like labor. So let's walk through some examples of these different kinds of dissonance over the different levels. All right. So let's talk about philosophical dissonance, and we'll look at it through a rational disconnect, an emotional disconnect, and a circumstantial disconnect. Okay. So a rational disconnect to the philosophical layer could be something like, say, emotionally, you really want to become a top-ranked video game player in whatever competitive video game you're into, okay? I've been there. It's like, I wanted to be the best at Overwatch, or the best at Counter-Strike, or the best at, whatever. And emotionally, I really wanted that, but rationally, I was disconnected from it because rationally, I was like, this doesn't matter. And so while I had some motivation toward it, there was always this damper on it. There's always this part that just held me back. And in a way that was good, but also it impacted my play because I didn't take it very seriously. Okay. And so I didn't actually have the motivation to rise to that thing. And that's fine and good, but not if that was a good goal, right? Sometimes the disconnect happens on the emotional level. So maybe your parents pushed you into a certain career. Maybe they pushed you into software engineering, and you kind of went along with it because you didn't know anything better. But then you realize, man, I hate this. Okay, and rationally, I recognize this is a good career, so rationally I'm aligned, but emotionally, this doesn't fit. This doesn't click. I don't like this, and this is more or less what happened to me. Okay, and so emotionally, you don't want it. You don't have a desire for it. So that's not going to work. That's going to shut down the motivational chain there. And sometimes on the philosophical level, where you're talking about the game, the big goal, the win condition, you're mentally aligned, you're emotionally aligned, but circumstantially things just aren't working out. Like, I'll see this sometimes where guys will have, I'll have a client who has these big business goals. Okay. And they really want them. They're good goals. They have, they're emotionally aligned with them, but they just had an employee leave. And that employee was a very crucial employee. And they're trying to hold on to their old goals based upon, that they built when they had the employee. So it's like they're refusing to acknowledge their circumstances. And that's going to burn you out. It's going to shut you down, and because you're not going to get the progress that you want, and then the motivation is going to disappear. So that's the philosophical level where we're talking about big picture of the game. Don't have that stuff lined up. You're not resonating with it rationally, emotionally, and circumstantially. You're done. So let's look at the strategic layer now. What does a disconnect look like here? Well, all right. Here's an example of a rational disconnect on the strategic layer. All right. Sometimes I'll get clients who come to me, or potential clients, and they're trying to quit porn, and they've been trying to quit porn for years. And I ask them, well, what have you been trying? What's your strategy? And their strategy is basically just white knuckling and using porn filters, meaning that they just try and squash the urge and hope that their porn filter will block them from getting to some porn. Okay. And they failed repeatedly for years trying to use that. And so at that point, there's got to be a rational disconnect, because I asked them, I was like, well, do you think that's working? And they're like, no, obviously not. And so they rationally know that their plan sucks. And so because of that, they don't actually even have that much motivation to try anymore. And I ask them, how hard are you trying? Like, about 3 out of 10, if that. It's like, well, they're not trying because they don't believe it can work. Boom. All right. So you need to believe in your plan, and you'd be surprised at how often people follow a plan they don't believe will work. Next would be an emotional disconnect on the strategic level. All right. This would be something like having a plan that you believe will work, but hating it. So like me, I hate doing long distance running. All right. It's just not something that I enjoy. And so if I was going to do a weight loss plan, and that plan required a lot of long distance running, well, I mean, rationally, I know it would work, but emotionally I hate it. And so I probably just wouldn't do it. Right. And so that's kind of obvious. But again, how often do I see people picking plans that they hate because they know that they will work, and then just not following them? I see this all the time. It's crazy. It's like we pick things for all kinds of reasons, because, oh, that celebrity does this, and I think that sounds terrible, but I want to be like them, so I'll do it. And then they don't. And then they're sitting there frustrated as to why they're not making the progress that they're looking for. And on the circumstantial level, when it comes to the strategy, it's like maybe you got a great plan, maybe you like the plan, but maybe you don't have the time to implement it. All right. Maybe you've got this awesome weight training plan that requires you to lift 6 days a week, but realistically, looking at your schedule, you could only get into the gym probably 3 days a week. All right. So it's like you try and force it and you miss the days, the program doesn't work, you get frustrated, you lose motivation, boom. Okay. All right. So it's like, you can see how this works. It's like, you gotta be completely lined up. And so we'll do the tactical layer here. Hopefully this isn't boring. I mean, like, I'm kind of walking through lots of examples so that hopefully you can get that light bulb moment and be like, oh, that's where the chain in my motivation is getting broken. So on the tactical level, the rational disconnect would be to just not know how to do the thing that you're trying to do. So super obviously, it would be something like starting an Olympic weightlifting program, but not having any idea how to do Olympic weightlifting, like not even knowing anything about the form or whatever. You show up and you're like, I'm just going to try and wing these weights around, and then you hurt yourself. And like, okay, that's a rational disconnect that's going to cause some dissonance and, mess up the motivation. Okay. Maybe you know how to do it, but you actually haven't done the reps. You haven't internalized the knowledge. Okay. And this would be someone like going to the weight room and having watched a bunch of YouTube videos. They intellectually understand it, but they haven't baked that knowledge into their nervous system to actually execute it. Maybe instead of doing the full Olympic lift, they need to do some kind of simpler progression and do a number of those progressions until they're able to really do the big thing. And so, that's that. But like, this also holds true to internal sorts of things, like anything involving willpower. Like if you're trying to become more focused, you're trying to spend a lot of time doing creative writing. Okay. If you're trying to do a lot of creative writing, that is a skill. It's something that takes effort. It takes know-how. And you might need to build yourself up to it. If you jump in saying like, I'm going to do 3 hours of creative writing every day, and the most you've ever done before that is 10 minutes at a time, good freaking luck with that. You need to learn the skills. You need to learn the skill of focus. You need to learn how to focus. You need to learn how, like, the different ways in which you can draft out ideas. Like, there's a lot of tactics involved in this. And so that's the rational and the emotional part of the tactical. And then the circumstantial piece is like really, it's kind of like about the tools and fundamental things. It's like, all right, did you get sick? All right, well, that's going to mess up your ability to execute. Is your computer broken? Well, if your computer's broken or it's super slow, the tools break down, you're not going to be able to do it. It's kind of like when you think in tactical, think like, tactical military unit. They're all about their gear and stuff like that and their ability to execute. It's about skills and execution and equipment to like make the stuff happen. And if any of that stuff breaks down, you're gonna get screwed up and motivation's gonna get knocked down a peg. What I always do when I'm working with a client one-on-one is that I have to constantly be asking them, does this resonate? Does this resonate with you? And if I want to be more specific, if I want to target one of these layers, I'll say, how does this feel? If I want to check their emotional resonance, I'll ask them, what do you think? If I want to check their rational resonance, and I'll ask them, how well do you think this will work for you? If I want to check their circumstantial resonance. Oh my goodness, I'm giving myself a tongue twister over here. So it's like, if we continue forward with a plan, and I don't have resonance on all three of those levels across the strategic, across the philosophical, strategic, and tactical, then it's not going to work. And sometimes you don't need to map it all out so explicitly, but you got to be able to at least iteratively adapt and adjust and make the corrections in order to make sure that all that works. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So how do we make sure this happens? How do we make sure that we have this resonance across these levels? It's actually a really simple thing, but like most simple and powerful things, it's really, it takes a while to really appreciate it. At least it took me a while to appreciate it and be able to bring it to you today. The heart of resonance, which then is the heart of creating compelling games, which then is the heart of creating self-motivation, is creativity. You have to be able to engage in creative effort, because it's only through creativity that you're going to be able to find the resonance on all of the levels. And so what does this mean? Well, we have to be able to define this technically. And so let's do it. What would it mean to engage in creative effort? Well, I think it's pretty simple after thinking about it for a little while. Creative effort is the interplay between your rational mind, emotional mind, and circumstances. It's just the honest interaction between all of these. You kind of bounce your rationality, your values. You bounce your emotional desires, values and emotions, rationality, all this kind of stuff. You bounce them together, and then you bounce them off the circumstances around you. As you do that, you're going to come up with ideas. You're going to come up with ways to make it fit. So it's like this dance between head, heart, and context. And if you can engage in this dance, well, then you can make magic. And in fact, I think this is human magic. It's the dance between head, heart, and context. This is where all great creative inventions and progress comes from. It comes from someone being willing to step into that chaos and try to construct some order out of it. This is, very Petersonian. It's like you bring all these things together, and it's you get something new. You bring them archetypally. You could argue it's the masculine order meeting the feminine chaos, and they fertilize, and boom, something new comes out of it, and something that works, that's good, that brings more life, more value, more connection with it. So let's walk through some more examples here. All right, so we'll start off with the philosophical examples of creative effort. So on that philosophical level, what are we doing? We are trying to construct a compelling goal and scoreboard. Okay, and so doing this part here, it's all about this conversation between values and desires and your reality, okay? So maybe, like we were saying before, it's like you emotionally desire to be a top-ranked gamer, okay? But maybe in terms of your values, what you really want to do is become a novelist, okay? That's really how you want to live your life. You really value that creative work. You think you've got the talent for it, and that's someone you want to be. And then the circumstances, though, is that you're stuck in a kind of tech job that takes a bunch of your time and you hate it. Okay? So at this point, you got to construct a path out of this. How do you move forward if these are the things that are going on inside of you? Well, you have to creatively think about it. You got to think, well, what am I willing to do? What am I willing to make happen? And almost always it's some kind of compromise. And the creativity is in finding the compromise that's going to work for you. So maybe what it means is that you got to sacrifice the desire to be a top-ranked competitive gamer. Okay, maybe you got to completely sacrifice that. And what you're going to do then is you're going to work as a novelist on the side because you can't afford to quit your IT job right now. Okay, and so you set it up then. Well, then you have to start moving to the strategic layer to set up the plan. It's like, okay, I kind of have the general scoreboard. I'm going to quit this and I'm going to do this. And it's going to move me toward where I want to go, which is to become a novelist. And so very often you're starting to construct a bigger arc, a bigger pathway through your life. And it's hard to come up with these sorts of ideas. It's hard to find and plot your path through life. It took me a long time. I'm still developing it. But even though I've gotten big pieces together, I remember when I didn't have any of it together, I was going crazy. But I stayed in the chaos and I sorted through all the options, all the variables in front of me. And eventually, if you do this, if you're willing to stand in the eye of that storm, eventually something's going to click and you're going to be like, yes, I'm willing to make that happen. I'm willing to have this kind of compromise. And that compromise, it's the best you can do with what you've got. And as you continuously do that, you realize you have to compromise less and less and less because you get better and better at playing the game and you get more and more of what you want without sacrificing things that you really care about. It's just hard in the beginning. You're a low-level character when you got to level up, right? So now let's look at applying this to the strategic level, all right? So you've picked a goal. You know where you want to go. You know how you're going to keep score. But the issue here is that you need to have a plan to get there. And the paradox I found on the strategic level is that it's like the more believable the plan is, the less you want to do it. Because it's kind of like we all know the things that we could all come up with a plan that will get us to where we want to go slowly. We all know what that would look like. But the problem is, even though that could be dependable and we know 100% it would work, we don't want it because we want the bargain. We want to be able to get there super fast. So it's like instead of constructing a sort of like reasonable long-term plan for weight loss and strength, we try and follow the secret plan of, crash dieting and extreme exercise so that we can get ripped in 2 months. And so my recommendation is to stay away from that, all right? You got to actually have this compromise. Like emotionally, yeah, you want to get there as fast as possible, as easy as possible. But rationally, you got to know that the more sensational it sounds, the less likely it is that it's going to actually work, right? So you got to combine these two. You got to pit them against each other, and you got to find that middle ground. What is that compromise between believability and desirability? Okay. And this can be difficult. It can be difficult to have this conversation realistically with yourself, but if you do it, you stand in the eye of that storm, magic's going to happen. So if you're trying to get in shape, instead of trying to train like an NFL running back, maybe instead what you decide to do is something much more reasonable, like kind of what we're mentioning before. It's like you drink water, you eat vegetables, you eat protein, you strength train twice a week, and the other days you walk, okay? You walk for 15 minutes. And maybe you're not going to become an NFL caliber athlete in 2 months, but maybe you're going to meet your weight loss goals and get a little bit stronger over the course of a year, okay? And it's about what is fast enough, big enough, and doable enough to keep you compelled, to keep you believing in your progress and also excited about your progress. Because if it's too reasonable, if it's too small, you're just not going to care about it, right? It's like, okay, I could say, oh, well, you could lose weight and you could be in great shape in 10 years. It's like, you're like, I don't care about that. So let's look then at the tactical layer, all right? And on the tactical layer, you got to be able to resonate with, knowing what you're doing and be able to do it. right? And the creativity here is actually, it's like you're creating the patterns. Really, it's like you're creating the patterns that move things forward. You're creating the patterns in your external world around you, like your immediate environment, and you're also creating those patterns inside of you, in your rationality, and then also inside of your physical body, inside of your emotionality. It's like a conditioning. It's the training sort of layer, right? It's like we talk about the tactical units in the military. What do? They train like crazy. They train like crazy because they need to have this stuff automatic so that when it's go time, they can execute. And the same thing goes here. So it's like you need to be able to look at your situation, understand the problem points, and deconstruct them so that you can figure out, all right, here's what needs to change. So for example, like with helping people quit porn, one of the things early in my career, I was like, man, how do I get people to just make the right decision in the moment? And I had to study that for years to be able to construct a process that could then be practiced. And once someone could practice the process, which I call the cut method now, that's the more evolved version, and you can look at that as, you can see that in the Heart of Action. I pretty much outline it there, the Man of Action series, that one, Heart of Action, and then also How to Process and Release Sexual Cravings if you're interested in it. Both those videos are on my YouTube channel, but it took a while to come up with this process, but once I had the process in place, people could drill it. They could practice it, and they could actually make this process, they could drill even more effectively once I developed the Metascript method, because then they could do it from any point in time, whether they're doing it ahead of time, in the moment, or after the fact, whether they, if they screwed up. It's not just the patterns inside of you, like I was saying, it's the patterns around you as well. It's like, sticking with the porn example, it's like if you keep your phone with you all day and you bring it into your bed with you and you wake up in the morning and you look at it, you're massively increasing the chances of you coming across triggering imagery when you're in a potentially vulnerable situation. So maybe you just got to keep your phone out of your bedroom, something like that, right? It'd be like the person who's on a diet taking the junk food out of the house. These are tactics. These are the hacks and tips and tricks, and there is a place for them, and the place for them is on the tactical layer here. And if you can get a good set of tactics, then it's going to be really supportive of your strategy and therefore your long-term goal that you're philosophically aligned with. And you got to think about it. You got to think about how your circumstances are set up and then creatively explore them and come up with ideas. Okay? And that's the heart of it, is you got to be creative here. And a lot of this is going to be, sometimes it's going to be just stepping into the chaos of all the different options in front of you. But I would say that more often than not, what you're going to be stepping into is analysis of your feedback loop. Okay? Like after something happens, look at it. How did it go? What happened? What can I tweak? Creativity is an iterative thing. That's the way it works. It goes in stages, in processes. And you've got to be willing, if you want to be a master of motivation, you have to be willing to iteratively create. Okay? It's like you got to look at, all right, well, here I start. Like if you follow my habit periodization idea, then it's like you start light with a goal. You start with a simple game that's not super hard. It's like the simplest game for a diet would be, I'm going to drink or I'm going to drink maybe like a gallon of water a day or half a gallon of water a day. You pick an amount and you start there and you see what happens. And maybe you adjust, and then maybe you add another thing. It's like, okay, I did that worked good. And then I adjust again. And, I got an interview with Dan John where he talks about this, and very little goals, very little steps that are iteratively analyzed and improved upon. And then all of a sudden, big changes have occurred. But you got to be willing to stay in that process, stay in the creative process. It's like, this isn't something you do one time if you're serious about managing your life. You don't just be creative once, come up with the perfect plan, and then you just get to coast along for forever. No, you need to be constantly engaged. And the thing that really holds a person back in this is in their unwillingness to play a bigger game. All right. Sometimes when you get into the weeds and you start trying to make something happen, you realize, oh wow, this is a lot harder than I thought. Like for a lot of guys, they'll get into this process of quitting porn, thinking that, all right, I'll just knock this out real quick, my life will get better. And they realize, holy shit, this is connected to so much stuff. Like, this is a big problem. It's way harder than I thought it would be. And it's connected to all this deep crap inside of me, all this insecurity, all these life problems, everything like that. It's way bigger. And you got to be willing to play that bigger game. And if you do, you get bigger rewards. There's the bottom line is that if the game is big, you're not going to win it by playing small. You know, that by putting your fingers in your ears, be like, oh, no, I don't see all these other problems. I'll just quit porn. It'll be blah, 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 blah. It's like, no, it's not going to work. Like, it sucks sometimes, but that's what makes it dramatic and compelling. Like this video that I'm doing right now, the outline that I'm looking at on my screen here, it is, let me see, it is the 23rd draft that I went through on this thing. And each draft, it got a little bit better, and it was an ongoing conversation between my head, my heart, and my context. Like, my head says, hey, you got to get this done. You know, my heart says, yeah, but it's got to be good enough. And the context is like, you know, well, we got all this other content we got to do. We got to make some money. We got to do X, Y, and Z. And so it's challenging to balance all of these things, but eventually, through sticking through it and trusting the process, I knew eventually there was going to be a point where I had enough mental, emotional, and circumstantial resonance where it's like, it's time. And this is a creative discipline that I've developed from years of doing this. Earlier me would have just churned out something less good. But the problem was, if I had done that, I would have missed all the stuff. Because like this video started very differently and much more simple, but I discovered all these different models. Like, I'm just scratching the surface in this video of all the crap that I uncovered, but I had to dig in a few different directions to figure out, all right, here's the main vein of the thing that I've uncovered, you know, the ore of creativity that I've, you know, discovered down here digging around. This is the main vein. This is how I'm going to break down. This is how I'm going to share it with you. It took a long time, but this is how it's going to go with everything in your life. So surrender yourself to that process, get in there and play a bigger game. Think bigger. You know, you need to compromise, but you don't need to compromise so much. Usually we know where we need to compromise, and it's usually in kind of the areas where we know we're holding on to some bullshit. We know we're holding on to some high stimulation, low value activity, some kind of escapism, some kind of bad habit, some kind of something that's holding us back. We know we probably got to offer that, you know, up on the pyre and sacrifice it for some greater good, okay? As long as you're willing to do that, you can continuously evolve your life in unbelievable ways. Like, I had no idea that I was going to end up here, and I have no idea where I'm going to end up in the future. I've got a plan for the next, I got a rough plan, but I'm going to be willing to constantly evolve and shape it as I go. And hopefully this has inspired you to do the same, because you have way more power than you think if you're willing to actually connect with yourself, sort through all the pieces, go slow, and just like let it happen. It's like, don't ham-fist it, don't force it, because if you force it, I can guarantee there's something on those levels that's not resonating, okay? And this doesn't mean be inactive either. It's like there is a time where it's like got to be good enough, and some of that's going to be learned through experience. So if you're young, it's okay. You're allowed to screw up in your 20s. You're not allowed to screw up in your 30s, though. So if you're over 30, no, just kidding. You're always allowed to screw up. So, you know, if you're playing a game, then, you know, it's okay. Mistakes are part of the game. So that's what I have for you guys. Hopefully you found this useful. Let me know in the comments below which piece of this you tend to get stuck on. You know, if you identified something that wasn't working for you, let me know below. But, you know, hopefully you guys like this. Play big. I'll see you in the next one. Most guys fail to build good habits because they're stuck in bad thought patterns. Until you recondition your brain to think new thoughts in the moments that matter, you'll keep ending up in the same old places over and over again. This is why I created the Metascript method. It's a free guide that will teach you 3 simple yet insanely powerful journaling techniques that, when practiced regularly, will reprogram your brain for near automatic success. I've read hundreds of client journals in my years as a professional coach, and I've identified exactly what you need to put down on the page if you want to create positive life changes that truly stick. And no, just endlessly writing about your feelings doesn't work. So if you want to learn my secret weapons of self-development, then click the link below and grab your free copy of the Metascript method now.